Good morning. Welcome back to Salam Media. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri. In a bit, we'll be delving into an intense political landscape discussion. This is going to be with Professor Sipho Seepe, where we'll be chatting a bit about the GNU and the latest on that. Also, the Democratic Alliance demands, for significant cabinet positions in the government of national unity, which have sparked debates about whether this is a strategic power play or something more. Joining us to provide this his expert analysis is political analyst Professor Sipho Seepe, who's joining us via StreamYard. Prof, thank you so much for giving us your time. The GNU still in the headlines, dominating the headlines, and we still haven't had a cabinet since the president's inauguration. Everyone is still waiting with bated breaths, but we are seeing the DA coming really, really strongly in negotiations. Their demands are becoming increasingly interesting to look at. It's like umuntu ovelayo. When they say gancane gancane uyavela, you're showing your true colors and what you really wanted. What do we make of this? What do we make of this power play so far that's involving the ANC and the DA, and specifically the DA's heavy-handedness in their demands in these GNU negotiations?
I think we should first start with the state of play, which is what the DA was trying to point out to the ANC. And the state of play is the ANC keeps on talking about that the appointment of the executive is a priority of the president. And they said, yes, we agree. But we agree to the extent that you need to also to realize that that is not possible without us. You need to realize that you did not win elections. And for you to set up a government, you need 50 plus 1. And therefore, you are going to need coalition partners. So when you invite us, you are not doing us a favor. This is not an act of charity on your side. You are forced to do so. So the DA went back to simply saying, before we engage on all other issues, let us use this opportunity to remind you that you need us more than we need you. And they did one thing, and Helen Zille put it out to say, we were not going to support the election of the speaker had you guys not signed that statement of intent. So effectively, the DA says we would have chosen somebody else, but at the last minute, you signed. So effectively, pointing out to you that we are the tail that wags the dog. So that is the first statement that they made. Then the second statement that the DA made was to say, you must also remember something that is obvious, is that there's a parliamentary. And when the parliamentary comes to parliament, we will not vote against the president we had voted for. But that was a polite way of saying that we know that you will need a support from us to defeat any motion that may be brought to parliament, because it will be a matter of numbers. And you and us combined, we can defeat that motion. But what Helen Zille was also saying, he simply said, don't mess with us. And she knows full well that if they mess with the DA has resources to deal with this matter. It was the DA that went and announced that it would go to the FBI to look at whether the parliamentary has violated the US laws and whether the parliamentary reeks of money laundering. So if you're going to be engaging with people who have a gun at your head, you better understand that they can bring you down. And these are the point of entry in these negotiations, just to remind the ANC that you don't run the show. And the second thing, and which is the third point that we're raising, is that if we're going to form a government, we want ministries. And those ministries must, the number must be proportional to the number of seats we got through elections. So that you should know that you're not doing us a favor when you give us, you say, 4 ministries. In terms of proportionality, we expect that 30% of the ministers in the new government will come from the DA. So you're talking about a party that drives a hard bargain, but it drives that hard bargain from a position of strength. And it drives that hard bargain from where the ANC and the president of the ANC is already a wounded animal, where the ANC is already wounded. I mean, we're talking about the president who has led his party to a decline of 17% in one electoral cycle. That's a very serious rejection by your traditional voters.
Mm. Prof, you mentioned something very, very important, specifically being the Phala Phala issue, right? I think if there's something that's really concerning for me, and I don't know, maybe you could just, dissect it for us. The Democratic Alliance was playing a opposition role in a lot of ways. You can say they did really well when it comes to holding the ANC accountable for some of their misdemeanors, and seemingly with the current status quo, we are going to lose the DA as the official opposition, and already we are seeing them essentially saying, if the ANC toes the line, we are willing to be quiet on certain issues. The Phala Phala issue, well, we're here now. We are part of this team, and we won't be that voice that was loud in Parliament to make sure that the ANC and everyone who's in power at that given moment is held accountable. Isn't this a point of concern? I know we have the MK, which are going to be the official opposition in the 7th administration, but we don't know of their track record. We don't know if they would be as forthcoming, with issues such as Phala Phala. Are we losing that voice that's going to hold power to account in Parliament, in the DA?
Oh, without a doubt. And at the same time, what you're also exposing is the hypocrisy of both the ANC and the DA. The DA had always said it is a party that is there to ensure that it will deal with the malfeasance. It will hold the executive to account when the executive goes awry or when it violates the constitution. Now the same DA says, we know that the Parliament matter risks and the stench is too thick to ignore. But we will turn a blind eye if we work with you because we never voted. Although later, to her credit, Helen Zille indicated that if the leaders were such that it does not favor Ramaphosa, they will not undermine what they call the rule of law or the legal outcomes. So effectively, even as they make that promise, they also tell Ramaphosa that we can even change our minds. But what is very clear is that being a member of the government of national unity, what it does, it will dilute the voice of the critical voice that the DA was playing. But the other parties would assume that space. I mean, I've got no doubt that both the EFF and the MK will be equal to the task. I mean, if you listen to the language of the new leader in Parliament of the MK party, Dr. Hope, he's made it very clear that they are there to really hold the executive to account. And the EFF has a history of doing that. And it will not now have fellow travelers who should share the same ideological posture with regard to the notion of economic transformation in this country. So yes, the DA effectively will no longer be playing that particular role because you cannot have it both ways. You cannot be in government and at the same time be in opposition. And this is the point that also Malema was reminding them that the MK may be a third party in terms of support. But if the DA goes into government, it can no longer be seen as a party in opposition.
Mm. I want us to come back to this power play and the DA strategy. A lot of people are saying, well, this demands of the 30% ministerial positions that they are demanding is maybe posturing, negotiating high and willing to settle for at least 6 or 5. What do you think of this? Do you think is it necessarily posturing, or um, the DA's demands are a strategic move to gain more influence? Something like a soft coup, which could essentially, if things continue unfolding, could ultimately see the Democratic Alliance as the leader of this GNU, because it looks like they're slowly positioning themselves as that, and the ANC just needs to give in to their demands because the ANC is coming in cap in hand. They are wounded from the elections. They are looking for friends, and the DA seemed like the one partner which would be, willing to accommodate them with terms and conditions, of course.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, the DA has been very consistent in its posture, not only now. As far back as 2016 and 2019, it had made it very clear, and Helen Zille herself, in her own words, that during her lifetime, she'll see the ANC as a dead party, as a party that would have been more of a carcass. So she doesn't enter this to be nice to the ANC. There is a political agenda. Helen Zille has a constituency to please, and she has a responsibility to first say, this constituency of mine has given me a mandate, and that mandate is also to ensure that their interests and the privileges that they've enjoyed over the years are not disturbed. So that's why she said we are willing to partner with somebody, and actually she was the first to talk about the ANC of Ramaphosa. And we must also understand that when we talk about the Ramaphosa, we're not talking about simply an innocent leader of the ANC. We're talking about a leader of the ANC whose presidency was supported by individuals, groupings that are historically anti the ANC. And when you're a leader and you're supported by the enemies of your party, they are not supporting your presidency because they think you're going to advance the interests of their party, of your party. They are putting money so that there will be payback time. They are putting money on you because you are the best bet to sustain white supremacy. You are the best bet to ensure the prolonged survival of white privilege. So they know full well what they were dealing with. So their support of Ramaphosa is not because they think Ramaphosa is a nice guy. They think Ramaphosa is a useful idiot that they can use for their broader political agenda of the sustenance of white privilege and white interests.
I want us to focus now on the ANC itself and their strategy in reacting to the DA's demands. The ANC, without a doubt, they're a very proud political party. And right now, it seems like they are being slapped around by the Democratic Alliance and Helen Zille. Could there be potential risks of the ANC pulling out of the GNU? How likely is that? Are they likely to now go the route of the MK and EFF, which was expected by a lot of people, or are they going to stick around, play presidential as they have been, and work for the greater good of the country, or is going to be too much to take? And what would the implications thereof be? Because we, at the end of the day, we need a stable government, we need cabinet to be formed, and the country needs to start working.
Well, my sense is that I don't think you would have a situation where the ANC will want to pull out. The ANC enjoys being in office, it enjoys power, and they would like to sustain that power. So, one thing is that they are committed to remaining in power. The other possibility is for them too ghastly to contemplate of being in the opposition and letting go of the, the benefits that comes with being in office. So that part The DA, on the other hand, can actually collapse this GNU by working out, because the parties that are signatories at the moment are not enough without the EFF and MK party to be able to pass the threshold of 51%. So that is where the crisis. So you could actually say this marriage of inconvenience is a marriage that is actually forced.
And the standout thing is obviously the coining of this term, the GNU. I think it's starting to show, and I think for a long time, a lot of people have been saying this is not a GNU. It doesn't reflect, 1994, but there's still an insistence from the ANC, from all of the other political parties involved, to call it the government of national unity. Why is that? Why are they insisting on calling it a GNU? At whose benefit does calling this formation, this coalition, a GNU?
Well, and part of it is an attempt to camouflage the facts. The GNU of 1994 was different. The ANC did not beat the National Party. The ANC had obtained 62%. So when the National Party walked away, there was no crisis. The government continued. But right now, if the DA walks away, then you will have a collapse of government, because you'll no longer be meeting the threshold that is actually required. And so this use of the same terms, when context and the play is different, it's all misleading and is deliberate. But it is convenient for the ANC to use that as if it is in control. And at the moment, we know it is not in control. That's why it is going to say we want to invite anybody. And they are still trying to have as many people, because the only way that you can neutralize the demands of the DA is to have more black parties. And that will mean that you might have to take the EFF, or you might have to take the MK party. And unfortunately, the hostilities that exist among African people, the notion of self-hate, makes it easier for those who are in control to prefer the people who do not look like them to co-govern. It is a part of what Biko and people like Mandela, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X talked about, that the damage that was done to African people through colonization and apartheid is such that black people end up disliking each other intensely. And this is what the white folks are using to promote black on black violence, and also to promote black disunity. This is why it will be very easy for a black government to unleash the military might on its own people, just like apartheid did. But as you know, within apartheid, the apartheid government will never unleash any violence against its own children, its own people. But the black governments did not waste time in doing so. And we also hear the language of threats, of deployment of forces. But the truth is, once you use military force and naked power, you need violence to stay in power. It means you have lost legitimacy. Only government that have lost legitimacy resort to use of violence and naked power.
And just lastly, before I let you go, Prof, future projections, in your opinion, what are the likely outcomes, of the standoff between the ANC and the DA? Could we see a resolution that satisfies all parties involved? Because I don't think in any negotiation, anyone wants to leave the negotiating table feeling like, they're the loser here. Or even if you lose, you don't want to lose by a big margin, but you want to feel like you got an upper hand over the other guy. Are we going to reach that consensus in the standoff? How do you see it panning out?
Well, the ANC will blink. Remember, the attitude that has been taken by the DA, it's a very simple, is that we got a mandate, and there's a will of the people, and that will of the people must be respected. And if we got 20%, that 20% must translate itself it must find political expression in the number of seats we're going to get. And we are not going to settle for anything less. We might quibble here and there about which departments, but in terms of representation, that representation must be respected. But also, we are also dealing as a DA. They say we are dealing with a wounded party. We are talking about also a president who's already compromised, both politically, but also in terms of these issues that have to do with law and the constitution. The Palapala matter hangs like a sword on his head.
And you mentioned that the ANC will blink first. Are we witnessing the beginning of the end of the ANC? Is it following the trajectory of other liberation movements, worldwide, particularly here in Africa? Because after the blinking, after the seemingly playing to the DA's demands and hands, will they still have any kind of authority? Will the ANC still be viewed as a liberation movement that's still strong, that's powerful, that's pro-black, and represents everything that the likes of Nelson Mandela and the vision that they've had for black leadership and what it can do for South Africa and the poor, marginalized population?
No. First, the ANC was punished because it failed to advance the interests of its traditional support. And it failed when it had an outright majority. Now, with one of its hands or legs shackled, it is unlikely to achieve that which it failed to achieve when it had an outright majority. So one can expect that as we move forward, that failure will be multiplied, and the people will start seeing the ANC no longer as a party of liberation. They will no longer see it to be a party that is known, if one were to invoke Mandela, if the party that is willing to work with the party of white bosses and black stooges. So this is where the ANC is at the moment. So you would have all these revolutionary sounding phrases, but in the end, you're talking about a party that is ideologically bankrupt. And you're also talking about a party that is now losing its political and social and cultural capital. It is no longer a party that used to be a leader of society.
I think we're going to leave it there, Prof. Thank you so much for giving us your time and for your incredible insights. Always a pleasure chatting to you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that was Professor Sipho Seepe, political analyst, giving us insight on the latest on the GNU and the formation of a cabinet. We're still waiting. For the president. The week is almost coming to an end, and South Africa still doesn't have cabinet. There's a standoff between the Democratic Alliance and the ANC, which we hope, there would be some kind of positive outcome coming out of it. But the question still stands. You can interact with us on all of our social media pages. Is the DA attempting a soft coup in a GNU coalition? And we have some responses. The first one coming from Carol Gericke. Well, they're saying no, the DA is not attempting a soft coup. The ANC went back on their word after signing a deal with the DA before smaller parties joined the GNU. Mbalula messed up everything because he didn't read properly. That's a message from Carol. Thank you so much for that message and for interacting with us. We also have another message from a YouTube user. They go by the handle White Heart Silver Pelt, and they're saying, well, the DA is toxic towards black and colored. Towards black and coloreds. The ANC is going with them will just end up in an uprising in South Africa, and the markets would help the ANC out of this big mess. Well, I'm not sure about the markets helping the ANC out of this big mess because, well, since this marriage, as Professor Situla calls it, a marriage of inconvenience between the ANC and the DA, we've seen the markets respond rather positively to this formation of the GNU. But yeah, we are coming to the end of the week. We still don't have cabinet. Hopefully by today or tomorrow we'll have an announcement from the presidency. We're still waiting with bated breath. The country is waiting like never before, because I think there needs to be some kind of work that needs to start, and we need to have that announcement of a government, essentially. So yeah, really, really interesting times ahead. But for today, we have come to the end of our show. It's the conclusion of today's edition of News and Views, and we've covered some very, very impactful stories and heard from voices driving change in our world, from the youth in Kenya shaping their political future to the complex dynamics of coalition politics in South Africa. Today's discussions have been enlightening and powerful. Remember, the effect of change lies in your hands. Stay informed, stay engaged, and continue advocating for a better, more equitable world. Thank you for joining us on News and Views. I'm Salalo Makwidiri. Stay safe, stay informed, and have a wonderful day. We'll see you again tomorrow for the Friday edition of News and Views. Thank you so much to my team, Kolane and Nasreen Naidu, for making this possible. Tomorrow, early in the morning, 8 a.m. See you then. Bye.